The idea of a battery-driven portable DAC and headphone amp is kind of exciting for an audio enthusiast in a world full of Bluetooth everything. But when you're talking high-end headphones with high impedance, is an amp like this powerful enough to drive things like that and really be viable as an alternative to just wearing Bluetooth headphones? The FiiO Q11 gets a few key things really right and makes it a very promising offering, but it also gets a couple of things pretty wrong, in my opinion, that make me leery of whether I can ultimately recommend it, and I'll talk about that a little further in. So let's dive in. First, the sound quality. That's the biggest thing we want to discuss when we're talking DACs. It's not great, but it's good. It's not quite as precise as the Sound Blaster X G6 that I primarily use for all of my headphones. Big differences that I noticed: the upper and mid bass was a little bloated, a little busy in certain spots. It's not really bad, but it's a minor difference that I notice when I'm swapping between amps. It can actually sound good if you have headphones that are a little thin in that area, or if you're listening to things like heavy metal or rock that tend to be a little light there, but other types of music like EDM or music like AWOL Nation that has a lot of deep bass in it, I actually found it delivered the really low sub bass a little bit less impactfully than my G6 does. So there's a little give and take there. The actual detail is good in the instruments. I don't feel like my DT770 headphones or the 1990s that I primarily use. They didn't sound underserved with this amp, but it wasn't quite as crispy as with the G6. Considering this is an $89 DAC and headphone amp, I think for the money this is delivering in this regard really good value. And I have no complaints about it as a DAC. Headphone amping is a big thing that everybody is going to be concerned about. When I was first looking into the Sound Blaster G6, there were a lot of audiophiles, as it were, that were dismissing it entirely because it was USB powered, and they had it in their mind that there was no way that 5 volts of USB power could possibly deliver enough. I beg to differ, and I'll cover that in a different video, but for the sake of this, driven by a 2600 milliamp hour battery, I find that it does an adequate job on all of my headphones. But I'll back up and we'll get a little technical for a moment to unpack why I would argue that it's powerful enough, even if its technical specs aren't as high as some people would probably want in an amp. So a lot of really authoritative audio enthusiasts generally recommend, as a rule of thumb, you want to be able to hit 110 decibels with your amp. Not that anybody would sanely listen to music at that volume level for any length of time at all, on average. But transient peaks in music, like cymbal crashes, explosions, certain things like that, can be 20 to 30 decibels higher than the rest of the music that you're listening to. Now, a pretty good volume level that you might listen to if you're really jamming and head bobbing might be around 80 decibels. And so being able to hit 110 gives you that 20 to 30 decibel of headroom to still hit those transients even at a loud volume. Given that the DT1770s that I was doing a lot of the testing with this on have a rated sensitivity rating of 102 decibels at 1 milliwatt, meaning if we trust the manufacturer spec, that means with 1 milliwatt of power, these headphones are producing 102 decibels. Now, since we know from a technical standpoint that every doubling of power that we put into it increases the volume 3 decibels, which works out to about a 25% perceived volume increase, we would hit 105 decibels at 2 milliwatts, 108 decibels at 4 milliwatts, and then right around 8 milliwatts is where we would hit that approximate 110 decibels. So we go into this knowing, okay, we're going to need probably 8 milliwatts to achieve our goal with the particular headphones that I'm using at about 250 ohms. These are listed to be able to put out 19 milliwatts at 300 ohms, which I did the calculations, and for a 250 ohm pair of headphones like I'm using, it should be able to put out about 21 milliwatts on a regular unbalanced 3.5 millimeter connection. So that's plenty of headroom as far as I'm concerned. That's more than twice what we would theoretically need. Now note, if you do use a balanced connection, the power is roughly 2 to 2.5 times, and I'll show those up on the screen. So if you do have those types of headphones, you can drive them a lot better with this. But that's all specs and theory and numbers. How does it work in practical use? My anecdotal usage of this was pretty on par with what you'd expect. I was using on the volume level about 40 to 55% to get pretty good listening volume. I would describe it as the level of volume that you'd want to use if you're thinking, I'm going to be listening to this for an hour or two straight, so I don't want it to be like the max of what is comfortable loudness, but what is a pretty good, like, jam into it while you're working volume? 40 to 55%, depending on if it was like modern music that's compressed and comes off a bit louder, or if it's more classic rock where the dynamic range is higher, and so you have to turn the volume up a little bit more. But in that range, that's an acceptable amount of headroom to me, and so I'm comfortable with that. I would say on the whole, as long as you have headphones that are reasonably sensitive and not what you would call low sensitivity headphones, anything lower than 96 decibels at 1 milliwatt, which pretty much most headphones that are modern today are going to meet that criteria of being sensitive enough. And very few headphones that I've seen are higher than 300 ohms, so I could safely say that this amp will adequately drive most headphones. And so from an amp standpoint, this is sufficient. It's not quite as meaty as my Sound Blaster G6 either, or amps like the Shit Hell, or other ones that can go well over like a couple of watts altogether, giving you plenty of power for any headphone. But for something portable, this does the job. And again, just like in terms of sound quality, it's not great, but it's good. And at the price point, I think it's a fair offering. Battery life, to me, was pretty much what they promised. They say that the 2600 milliamp hour battery can deliver about 13 hours. I wasn't sitting there with a stopwatch measuring it, but I would say that's probably on par with what I experienced the couple of times I let it run all the way down. But other than twice letting it run all the way down, I pretty much the rest of my review period used it the way that a typical owner would be using it, which is to say you use it for a few hours, and then when you have some time over the next day or so and you think of it, you plug it back in to charge it up, so it's never getting like super low. And it carried very well in that way. And I think as an amp that you're using around the house for things and then throwing in a bag for part of a day, it has plenty of power, and I wouldn't be worried about anything there. To me, the real weak spot of this DAC and headphone combo is with the cables that they include in it. And I'll unpack that a bit. So what's nice is they give you 3 cables. So they give you a USB-C to USB-C so that you could plug it into a computer, a tablet, an Android phone. They also give you a USB-C to Lightning so that you could run it out of your iPhone. That's great. And they give you a USB-C to USB-A so that any of your older hardware with the larger plug, you could still plug it into that. That's nice, and out of the box, you can plug this into basically anything. That's a win. But the real loss here is phones and tablets will not connect to a device they perceive as a high draw device that's going to pull too much power to use, and they'll come up with an error message. To get around this, FiiO just included cables that are data only and no power, which forces the device to just acknowledge it as data, and then it runs off of its own battery for the power. That's cool and it works, but here's the problem. All cables eventually wear out, and the Lightning cable in particular that's meant to go into your phone, they want you to stick the amp on the back of your phone and kind of have it plugged in like this. Well, look at how bent the cord is to do that. All cords wear out eventually, and they wear out faster when they're being bent heavily on a regular basis, which is exactly how this is meant to be used in a lot of cases. And there are not, that I have seen, any easily available replacement cables that are specialized like this, that do the data only and no power. So you're going into this amp knowing, I have a cable that is crucial to make this thing work, and my cable will eventually wear out, and I will maybe or maybe not be able to get another cable like it to keep this thing working. That's a real downer. The other issue I had is these cables are very short. Now, when you're using it attached to a phone just to bend it like I was doing a minute ago, the shortness of this cable is actually useful. But if you were trying to plug it into an iPad like I have so that I can hold it on a couch, or if I'm laying in bed at night and want to listen to corded headphones while I'm watching YouTube or movies or something, the cord is too short, and it puts a lot of weird stress coming out of the side of the iPad. Now, I was able to use a USB-C extension cable on the cable that it came with, and that worked great for about a day or two, and then inexplicably it stopped working when I used the extension cable, and would only work again when I went back to just using the stock cable by itself. So that's another downer for me, because I use my iPad a lot, arguably more than I use my phone, especially while I'm home. And so not being able to use this portable amp in any settings realistically with my iPad is a real downer. And I'm confused why they had to go this route, because on other FiiO amps that they have available, they actually have a little switch by the charging port where you basically tell it be in charging mode or don't. And if you tell it to be in charging mode, then it will know use a regular USB-C cable, and then it'll be looking for power from the device. So you could plug it into a wall charger, you could plug it into your laptop or your computer, and it would charge off of that. And then if you're going to plug it into your phone or tablet, you could flick the switch off, use a regular USB-C cable, and then still be fine. That's such an ingenious design. I don't know why they didn't do that with this, and making the whole way that this works so dependent on their special cables. Like I said a minute ago, that just feels like a ticking time bomb. Like the moment you take this out of a box, you're on a time limit. This will work for X amount of time, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, maybe a couple years if you're really careful with the cables. But I've gone through a lot of cables for my devices over the years. It's unusual, I find, even on a good cable, that it lasts longer than a couple of years with regular usage, the way that you would ideally want to be using a portable amp like this. And so, despite the fact that it has a lot going for it in terms of its ability to drive headphones and its general sound quality, I just don't feel like it's something I could really recommend to people for that reason. And it's such a letdown to me because I feel like it's such a minor design change that if FiiO had just made a little switch like that and you could use your own cable coming out of it, I would have said for $89, this is a great buy. This is a really good, fairly affordable way for an audio enthusiast to use a high-end pair of headphones portably wherever they go. You can shove this in a pocket with your phone and have much higher quality audio than your typical Bluetooth headphones will offer. And it's a good entry point for an audiophile to start upgrading their gear. I would have been able to say that in this review of this, but such as it is with this cable, your mileage may vary. And I just feel like where it shines best is plugged into my MacBook with a regular USB-C cable that it can charge, where I'm not worried about that. But then on the other hand, if I'm just going to be sitting on a desk plugged into my laptop, I might as well be using my superior G6 sound card and have better sound and more power. And so that's just a missed opportunity as far as I'm concerned. If they release another version of this down the road that has a switch like that, I would definitely be interested in checking it out. Otherwise, those are my 2 cents on this amp. Hope that's helpful for you if you're looking for a portable amp, and if you've had your eye on this in particular, feel free to ask questions if there's something I didn't quite address in this video. If you guys have your own solutions or suggestions to overcome some of this, throw them down there. Let's see what we can figure out. Otherwise, guys, thanks for watching. Please like the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.